Today on Future Forward, is copyright actually copy wrong?
Then the decentralized web movement is gaining traction.
And facial recognition is being banned. But why?
I'm Alexa Scordato.
And I am Steve Rosenbaum, and let us launch. Hey Alexa, how are you?
Hey Steve, I'm great.
I started out wanting this week's show to be like lighthearted and frothy and summery, and then it kind of took a weird turn into serious shit. Sorry about that.
It's like the deep, dark underbelly of the internet.
Yeah,
Get ready.
I'm afraid so. So we have 3 chapters in this week's show. We're going to do copyright as chapter 1. Then we're going to do the decentralized web, which is fascinating. And then we're going to end with facial recognition, which is actually a story from our friends at IEEE. It's a terrific story about cities and their decisions to begin to ban facial recognition. But first of all, I just want to say, in the most heartfelt way that I can, listeners, viewers, if you're out there and you like our show, we really would love if you would do the little 5-star thing or comment or do something on iTunes. It really matters. It helps other people discover us. So like, if you like Alexa and you don't like me, you should still give her 5 stars. And if you like me and you think she's tricky and complicated, you can, like, either way, we're different enough. One of us should be able to get 5 stars out of you. Don't you think?
And maybe you like your Amazon Echo a lot, in which case you're still giving an Alexa.
Yeah. By the way, I have silenced mine so that I can actually say your name out loud without it conflicting. All right, so let's just jump into this copyright thing because it's so complicated and so interesting. Do you remember the moment when you figured out that the stuff that your digital stuff in your life, that you didn't own it anymore, that you were really just borrowing it? Do you remember that?
So I was weird because I was one of the first schools that had Facebook. I went to Barnard, and so I actually was reading a lot about digital copyright back then, and I remember being super stubborn and not uploading photos to Facebook. Like, I had never uploaded an album and tagged my friends on Facebook because I knew at the time I was going to surrender all ownership of those photos. This is back in like 2008.
And when you tried to have that conversation with your peers, they kind of went, yeah, but who cares, right? I mean...
Yeah, they were like, I want to see the photos from last night's party. Tag me.
Damn it.
Yeah, no one really cares.
By the way, I've thought of you as many things, but I've never thought of you as Buzzkill Alexa. That's very funny. Like, I'm not putting up the pictures because I'll lose the rights to them.
Yeah.
So I remember, I think the first battle I had was maybe with Adobe over Photoshop. And it's like, I paid whatever it was, $250 for it, but it had been a couple of years and I really didn't want to upgrade it. And I felt like I owned it and it was working fine. And they're like, nope, you got to go to this annual fee and you got to pay monthly. And the version you thought you owned, actually, we're not going to support that anymore. And it's dead. You're dead to us if you don't become a subscriber as opposed to an owner.
Yeah. No, there's so many layers to this because there's surrendering ownership, and then there's the reality that you maybe never even owned it to begin with.
But you know, part of it, I mean, maybe it's as simple as the shift from physical to digital. Right? I mean, so the article that brought this on was an article in Slate about the uncertain future of copyright. It was a terrific article, and it essentially went back to the original Betamax ruling, which I guess, I never really realized, but from that moment on, kind of all bets were off. Like, if the device can copy content without a Supreme Court issue, then copying is going to become a thing, and then the result of owners of copyright is going to be to fight back by essentially never letting you own it in the first place.
Right.
And maybe this is a non-issue, right? I mean, maybe the answer is, right. I mean, so the second thing that came up was this conversation about meme ownership, which is on one level kind of silly. I mean, so did you follow that story? This is the next web story.
I did. Yeah. So, I mean, all of these articles kind of made my head spin, but the meme one was interesting because it actually used Carlton from Fresh Prince of Bel-Air as an example the actor who played him was trying to copyright his dance, which is his signature move. It's part of pop culture fodder, and I think the end result is you can't, you can't. Period.
So I guess I didn't know that you can't copyright choreography.
Right. Michael Jackson could not copyright the moonwalk, and it wasn't even original to him. It was inspired by someone in the 1930s.
Right. So good news for Epic Games because it means they can take these moves and put them on their games and essentially pay no royalties. But I guess what it comes down to is I am passionately on both sides of this argument because
Totally. There's
I'm
so many people. You're a maker.
I'm a maker, and so I don't want my shit stolen. But on the other hand, I'm a reporter and a journalist, and I want to be able to reference things without without there being a copyright issue. So I believe in fair use, but maybe the bottom line is the algorithms can't tell the difference.
Yeah, I mean it's so tough because even as a consumer, there's nothing that annoys me more than when I see something and it says this video has been taken down because of XYZ, and it's some type of really cool remix or mashup of a bunch of songs. And I understand that the original artists, it's their work, and I want to respect them. I want them to get their royalties, etc. But at the same time, the person who took the time to remix the content and make it into something that is just as entertaining, like I feel like they should get a slice of the pie too. There was a lot of work in there.
So is it as simple as we just have to get the tech up to speed so that it can carve out the pennies and share them, or is it really, I mean, I don't know. I guess I don't know is the answer.
I think there's an aspect of there are just questions like one, is anything original anymore? And then two, when it comes to putting anything on the internet, should we just throw in the towel?
Should we just throw in the towel? No, I don't think the answer is we should throw in the towel, obviously. But I also think, well, so let's get to the third story of this section because that maybe is the one that's the light at the end of the tunnel, and that's the Creative Commons stuff. So I'm a huge fan of Lawrence Lessig and what he did with Creative Commons. Just think it was visionary and brilliant and important and magical. And at the same time, I don't think it solved the problem. I think it began to solve the problem, and I wish. I guess I wish that he'd stayed longer there.
Yeah, I mean it's one solution that to a problem that requires many solutions.
So, Creative Commons was in the early Larry Lessig days absolutely brilliant because it essentially asked this really fundamental question, which is, what if I want to share? What if I want to share, but I don't want to share with people that want to make my content into a commercial? Maybe I want to share among artists or creative people. And so there's all these flavors to Creative Commons. I guess I worry that, I guess I thought they lost their way a little bit, but then they made this announcement that they were basically building a search for Creative Commons images, which I thought was incredibly brilliant and wonderful.
It was huge. As someone who blogs occasionally, you're always searching for images, and if you have the opportunity to actually look through the library, there are over 300 million images there, which is incredible.
So maybe this is a trick question. You can say no comment, but do you find if you're using something, you're using it in a non-commercial way, you're writing an article, there's a picture, the picture is relevant, do you pause because it's not because there's a copyright issue, or do you go, you know what, I'm going to use it for something it's going to have very little I have mixed feelings about the ownership of issues for non-commercial journalistic blogging purposes.
Yeah, I mean it's just a habit. I'm not the status quo. I think I've always been a photographer, and I've always uploaded content to Flickr under Creative Commons, and I have no problem if people take any of my images, but I do want the attribution.
So when you upload to Flickr, do you have is it preset to Creative Commons for all your uploads?
It is.
All right, and we won't do this on today's pod, but let's just put a pin in the fact that Flickr is probably flickering away.
Yeah,
which is a little sad. All right, so we've agreed that copyright is complicated. We've agreed that Creative Commons has done a good thing but doesn't solve it. But net, if you're using things that are copyrighted, you probably are borrowing them, not owning them anymore. That's probably the thesis of chapter 1. Like, no more ownership.
Absolutely. And there's so many licenses now. Like, it's in my head spins. When I worked at Stack Overflow, fun fact, all of Stack Overflow's content is free, open, can be used under an MIT license. And there is like a lot of research we did between Creative Commons and MIT and the merits of both. Like, this is an issue where if you go down the copyright rabbit hole, you can spend weeks, hours, months just trying to understand it.
So let's move to chapter 2 and a different rabbit hole, if you will. Let's move to so there's this fabulous growing movement of this decentralized web, the dWeb. First of all, is that a phrase that you were familiar with, or are we doing that? Because I wasn't until today's show.
No, I was. I think I mean, if you follow like the open source movement, which is, I guess, I don't know, I'm not fluent enough, I guess, to say, oh, are these perfect adjectives, but they're related. This notion of a web that is not controlled or governed by a few entities, but rather lives in disparate parts and is hosted on smaller servers, and sort of everyone has a slice of that.
So here's the thing about the dWeb, and the thing that I find troubling when I read about it, it seems to me you got these, a handful of these early web innovators, Brewster, Kahle, the folks that
Tim Berners-Lee.
Tim Berners-Lee is amazing, and essentially what they're saying is we just want to go back to the web that we built. Like, we don't want to reinvent anything. We just want to stop having for-profit companies like Facebook own the future of the web. I mean, that's really what they're saying, right?
Absolutely. You have these closed walled gardens and monopolies emerging. If the internet were a country today, we'd all be citizens of maybe 10 countries max.
So let me ask a cynical question. So this is an article that IEEE wrote actually in October of 2018 about Brewster, Kahle, and the decentralized web movement, which I found fascinating. There is actually dWeb Camp.
I want to go.
4 is coming up this summer. They had 900 attendees last year.
Yeah, and the first one was like 100 or 200.
It's funny you should say that, because my first reaction as I read it was, I want to go.
Yeah, we should go.
Yeah, we should go. Although camping, I'm not a
Oh wait, it's an actual camp?
Well,
I thought it was like a pod camp.
No, it's a beautiful outdoor event with tents and camping.
Oh, that's what they meant by it's like Burning Man meets hackers.
Although if you go to the page, we'll put it in the show notes. If you go to the page to apply, they say kind of in tiny little font, like, if you're one of these people that just can't do camping, there's a hotel down the road. We won't diss you if you want to stay in the hotel.
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, I might be the hotel guy. But I guess what I worry about is, is it really possible to unring the bell of the privatization of the web? Like, are these guys really, is Vint Cerf really going to be able to, along with Brewster, Kahle, and Tim Berners-Lee, are they going to be able to kind of get together and put the band back together, or is the ship sailed?
I don't think the ship has sailed, but this is me being optimistic. I think this is something where people have to start educating themselves, and they have to choose sides.
Ooh. Okay, I like that.
Yeah, I think this is like a central issue of our time. As technologists, as consumers, it's almost like understanding supply chain. It's like when it comes to making goods and transferring them from maker to consumer, what path does that take? And if you want to be on the side of a centralized web, then you're shopping at big box stores, Walmarts, Facebooks, Amazons, and Best Buys. And maybe not even Best Buys, just Facebooks and Amazons. But if you want to be part of the decentralized web, maybe you're going to shop from your neighbor down the block who grows basil and tomatoes, or you're going to shop at your local farmer's market. You're going to have choice, but it's not necessarily, you're not going to necessarily get, I don't know, a standard of quality per se.
So I think that's really sweet. That's a really sweet way to look at it, but I just think it's wrong.
Wrong in what way?
I think I can be about the decentralized web, and I think I can be about wanting people to have control of their own data, but I also think that I can buy light bulbs from Amazon.
I'm not saying there's like a moral good or bad. I'm just saying that I think early adopters like us, we actually have to choose a camp and advocate, or at least advocate for the decentralized web, because we need to bring balance to the force. In the absence of the dWeb movement not growing and getting traction, then history will play out and we will just have no choice.
All right. So if I buy your argument, and if our listeners buy your argument and they say, okay, I'm bailing on Facebook, I'm out, because by the way, it kind of feels a little bit like it may be past its prime, and I'll just pivot. Where am I going to?
You are choosing anything else, literally anything but Facebook.
So there are some. So there's an article that I wrote for Media Post that comes out tomorrow, and I found a couple of like Facebook decentralized web alternatives. They are out. You're right. They are out there, but they're definitely early days for sure.
Oop, hold on. Did I just do something to my camera, Steve?
You sent me a picture, but that's okay. It was kind of charming.
What just happened?
I don't know. It went bloop, then there was a picture. But wait. But I want to go back to this. Like you have to choose. You have to choose sides thing, because I'm not sure what side I would. I mean, I do know what. Obviously, I'm going to choose against Costco. I'm going to choose against. I don't know. But see, I think the world's changed in some different ways. I think I want to be able to support blogs and small content. Like, I'll give you an example. More and more of my reading now is on Medium.
Mm-hmm.
And I really like what Ev is talking about in terms of getting away from advertising supported content and towards subscription. I really like that. I like that idea of supporting writers more directly.
I love that idea, but I also miss the days when people had Blogger and MySpace and WordPress and movable type and whatever. Remember like
Yeah,
when
sure.
blogging was such a thing? Like it was almost like visiting friends' dorms. I would like visit people's blogs and blog rings, blog rolls, and it was cool. Like people set up shop. And nothing against Ev and Medium, but I also worry about Medium.
I don't think he's got the problem solved, but I think I like that he's asking the right questions.
Yeah, I'm not saying the big guys won't go away, but it's like, can we trust the big guys to create a market where smaller providers and innovators even have a chance of staying alive?
All right. So if I wanted to interact with, like, what? So if we're talking about the next web, is decentralized web, dWeb, is that web 3.0? Are we at 3.0, or are we going back to 1.0?
I don't think we ever go back.
I know
anything.
it was a trick comment that I baited you and you took the bait, but of course we don't go back. And 3.0 seems old school in a weird way too. I don't know. I'll say this. After reading, I spent a lot of time reading about the dWeb and about what Brewster was doing and about Vint and about Tim Berners-Lee. And I think spiritually, I'm going to begin to follow this as a thread and support it intellectually and look for ways to support it with my web behavior.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I
Um,
think we have to. Like, it's my only ask of readers who care about the future of the internet is that you read up on the dWeb, and when you start making choices about how you build technology or consume technology, you just don't default to the big provider or the market leader as your choice,
all right.
because I think there are more choices out there.
All right. Chapter three. Chapter three, because it's, all right, I want to make sure we have time to do it. So, this is an IEEE article about facial recognition bans being proposed across the US. Um, and I was I was surprised by it in some ways. Um, let me start with an example, and then you can push back on my example. Like when I put pictures on Facebook, and it auto-magically tags all my friends in my pictures, I find that lovely. I don't find it creepy, even though I know kind of the underlying tech is probably creepy. I'm like, oh boy, all my friends know that I posted a picture of them. Wildly convenient. Um, and you already you drew that line in the sand, back in your college days, and said I'm not playing that game. This was when you weren't putting your pictures up on Facebook. It was before that you ever considered that it was going to be facial recognition, scooping or poking around in your pictures.
Yeah, but the following chapters to the story is I back up my photos on Google Photos, and I use an iPhone, and iPhone has that feature built in. Like, there's kind of no escaping. For me, the route is to just make sure one platform doesn't have everything.
Okay, so are, like when you find out that San Francisco is banning facial recognition, like does it just seem like a kind of a political shell game that's inevitable, or do you think there's actually a movement to rethink facial recognition?
I think, I mean, it's still so early, right? Like, I don't know if it can be political anything, because I don't trust politicians to know half the time, like, what the internet is and how it works. But I never bought into facial recognition technology. Like, I'm on an iPhone 8 Plus, and I can't bring myself to upgrade to the X, the having my phone look at my face to unlock. And I think it's just like it's I don't believe in the technology, so I'm highly biased. Oh, there you go, Steve. Steve's
It
waving his
it's
iPhone
it's a
XR.
10, and I'm not gonna lie, I hold it up, it unlocks. It's really super convenient.
So what do you? Is it does it feel magical? Like, what?
No,
You don't want to put your fingerprint on your phone. Like, I don't know.
I just hate passwords. I hate them so much, and passwords probably eat 10 to 15 minutes of every day of my life.
Yeah.
Uh,
Okay, well, here's like a weird spin on this, because one of the reasons why I don't like the facial recognition technology is I lost a lot of weight really fast a few years ago. And so the facial recognition technology actually parses out me as two different people.
and one could say spiritually, you are two different people.
Maybe, maybe.
Yeah, well, yeah, but your point is actually a really good one. So the IEEE Spectrum article that kind of triggered this chapter was about the bias in which facial recognition does particularly badly in certain minority communities.
Yeah,
Um,
AOC had this whole rant about this. It was like on all over Twitter the other day.
um, and I'm not gonna lie. If the police rolled up on me and said, "Hey, facial recognition says there's a warrant for you," that would be super creepy.
Yeah,
And
it's like Tom Cruise movie.
yeah, Minority Report. But at so here, let me give you a different example though. So you're driving down. So increasingly now, if you're driving anywhere, I don't have a car, but if I rent a car, increasingly most toll booths now use some form of Easy Pass or some kind of a reader scanner. It reads your license plate. It sends you it charges you. Like you know it, and the kind of techno eventual propagandists say, look, as long as you're not breaking the law, why do you care that the police can track your every move? Like, why do you care that it knows where your car is? And the answer is for all kinds of reasons, right? I mean,
Hmm.
You know,
I used to not care about this stuff until then technology influenced elections.
yeah. So I was reading yesterday that Saudi Arabia is now executing people for for being anti-government,
Hmm.
and they're it's not just that they're executing people, which is unbelievably terrible, but they're bringing them out into the public square on Friday afternoons and chopping their heads off. And I'm like that's a government that we consider an ally. So what we're not that far away from the federal government saying we think you're treasonous, and that's the death penalty. And by the way, we've decided that we're gonna copy our Saudi friends and do it publicly because, I mean, yeah,
Right.
all right, we
I mean, at the core
uh,
of this is just like you're the more data you're surrendering to platforms that have not really had a great track record recently, as entities you can trust. That's the thing.
all right. So we're in favor of cities rethinking facial recognition. I think we are. And just one more Alexa privacy question. So you're okay with your fingerprint, but not okay with your facial recognition? Is that it?
Yeah.
Fascinating. Because you think it's more accurate and less. Well, it is less passive, right?
Right.
That's maybe the difference. Is you have to offer it as opposed to having the city scan your face as you walk down the street.
Yeah, it's also just like a line in the sand. I mean, I get it. It's a really slippery slope. I think we just all have to set some digital privacy boundaries.
Uh, I'm going to leave it there because I think that's a really good place for all of our listeners to just draw a line in the sand, set digital privacy boundaries. I'm all about that. Have an excellent week. Stay away from cameras on the street corners, and I'll see you next week.
See ya.